Call the meeting to order. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next item up is the consent agenda. The recommended action is approve the following items, which are included in the consent agenda: 7A, meeting minutes; 8E, substitute pay increase; 9A, calendar approval for 2021 and 2022; and the 9B, the special education. May I have a motion to accept the consent agenda?
Yeah.
Thank you, Dan. Second?
Yes.
Thank you, Liam. Any discussion? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 6-0. Budget workshop. Turn it over to Dana.
Thanks, Rick. Can everybody hear me? Are we good? We have mutes and unmutes and volume and not volume. Everybody's good? Okay.
I can hear you.
Good. So Dana and I are going to talk about the budget. I'm going to start by providing you with an overview, and I'm going to share my screen and put some slides up there. They might look familiar to those of you who remember last year's budget workshop, because we try and follow some semblance of structure, but of course there's differences, and we'll make sure we point those out. And then a part of that will be Dana. Dana will join in and provide you with many more details than I'm going to provide you with. So, and some of it will be overlap. So if I say something and you're not quite sure what it was, Dana will probably provide you with a little bit more information. All right, so I'm going to share my screen and put a series of slides up here. Let me just, there we go. Okay, so so this is our first formal budget work session. We have talked about the budget before, so you're familiar with where we are. But tonight's work session, we're going to go through some of the processes of the budget and some of the details of the budget. We'll start with a focus on school budgeting, include just a general overview of what the process is like. Then we'll provide you with an overview of the first draft budget. Dana is going to provide you with the details of the first draft budget. We'll talk a little bit about an invitation for new ideas, and then we'll look ahead and talk about feedback. And in those number 6 and 7, we really want to make the point that even though we are doing this as part of a budget work session on Zoom with just the board, remember this is public, and that this is one of those opportunities for the public to really learn about what the school district spends its money on or plans to spend its money on, and of course where their taxes go. So these workshops and other public sessions that follow are really an important part of including the public in the school district budget. Okay, so as far as a focus on school budgeting itself, traditionally we have looked at, utilized some pretty specific guidelines for how the school district, how you as a board want to spend the money for the school district, and what guides you. And so typically these guiding ideas, documents are the strategic plan. This is the strategic plan I'm talking about, the one that was developed with widespread community input a number of years ago, that has then helped shape board goals every year. So of course your annual board goals are built on that strategic plan. It also includes future planning, and that's the school district's work every year on looking at what we do well and what we want to improve on. And then, of course, the financial considerations, in particular, the tax cap. And so our school district's always been very concerned with what the tax cap is and seeing that as a very important marker. Up to this point, ever since the tax caps come into play, the board has never opted to go beyond the tax cap. So these have been important factors. But just to be a little bit more specific, what are some of those goals? Well, they're goals that you as board members are very familiar with. Students first and foremost, a focus on high quality education, community outreach and involvement, emphasis on leadership and all those components, technology and how they contribute to learning, improving school culture, that work that we are constantly doing, including social and emotional wellness of students. The opportunity gap, a term that now you're all very well familiar with, that look at our students and why it is, understanding why it is that some do better than others and how we can try and narrow that gap. And then the financial piece, very important role of the school board, the financial responsibility. You're familiar with all of these goals, I'm sure. But there are some new ones this year, and I won't call them goals, I'll just call them issues that impact budgeting. And they are, of course, top of the list is the pandemic. The pandemic has had a huge impact on our school district, our daily operations, and also our expenditures and our revenue. The economic uncertainty that surrounds that. This concern that we've been talking about since March of the state budget and how the state budget is relying on federal assistance, and how that conversation has been going on since the beginning of that pandemic. And as if you're looking at the headlines these days, it continues to be a big issue, and we'll see in the next few weeks if federal aid to states comes through, because that will have an impact not just on the state budget, New York State and all the states, but also on how the state allocates state funding for education and how that education funding would impact us as a school district. So this is one of those moments when, what the Senate and the House and the President do will filter down and impact like Placid Central School District in a very real and tangible way. And then there's the fund balance. The fund balance is typically not a big conversation. We have, over the course of years, relied on fund balance for balancing our budget. And then last year we made a big point, and this was really before the pandemic hit, made a big point of trying to craft a much more honest budget that didn't rely on fund balance. And so this year's budget, the 2021 budget, does not use fund balance as revenue. That was the first time in many years that it happened. Well, the other thing that happened, of course, is that because of the way the pandemic has impacted the school district, our budget surpluses have increased. That was true with last year's budget, and it looks like it's going to continue to be true with this year's budget. So that fund balance becomes another issue at play here in terms of how does the board want to utilize that fund balance when it comes to budgeting. So those are some of the, I think, the themes, the guiding goals, the big issues that impact our budgeting this year. As far as the process tends to be the same every time we have a workshop. We'll come to you with a draft for draft 2 and draft 3, or whatever the final draft might be. We'll revise the known issues of revenues and expenses. We'll identify and re-identify budget items and maybe prioritize some items depending on our conversations, depending on how things change in the next couple of months. And then we will make changes to the budget drafts as we go. And that's based on what happens outside and also based on what happens in our conversations here. So that's just sort of a broad overview of the budget. In terms of this budget, so we're calling this the first draft budget. And I just wanted to share with you some of the highlights. Again, Dana has been working very hard on our budget. He's been working on it since, I would say, before, you can nod at this, Dana, I'm going to say before Christmas break, and since then, and really paying attention to all of the moving parts that have come through. And so this draft is based on already a couple of months worth of hard work. And so the total budget that we're presenting with you tonight, again, this is a draft, is $20,562,590. That's 2.92% higher than this current budget. It's based on a property tax levy of, there's the number 16,991,568. That's 1.685% higher than this year's property tax levy. And that would be essentially the tax cap. State aid, you're going to see, and maybe this is surprising to some, a higher number by 5.52% from this year, 3.3 million, a little bit more than 3.3 million. And I'll leave that explanation to Dana or to your questions rather than go into that, because as you probably know, if you've been paying attention, the state budget's pretty complicated this year, and it's still not all settled 100%. It's also just the executive proposal. It's not the final budget. Now, usually when we provide you with a budget, we say the total estimated amount over the tax cap. In other words, what this draft has in there. Usually there's a big number there. Usually we're you know, the first draft we've overshot by $700,000 or $500,000 or $400,000. But that's not the case with this draft budget. This draft is balanced. So this first draft budget, and Dana can get into more detail on that, is a balanced budget. It does include our anticipated building aid. That building aid doesn't show up on the executive proposal because that was based on October numbers. We expect when the legislative budget comes out, it will be based on the, I don't remember if it was November or December updates that which included the finalization of our capital project, which is what kickstarts building aid. And then this particular draft utilizes $71,186 from fund balance. That number's significantly smaller than any use of fund balance we've made in the last 6, 7, 8, 9 years. Last time I think it was $530,000 that we used. So that's a small number. Dana has also provided you with another option that shows a different use of revenue and a different tax increase, actually a different tax rate, very stable tax rate. So I'll let him share that with you. Okay. Just some overview. Again, you can look at these slides later. They're posted there for you. In the main categories, salaries, benefits, debt service, and BOCES, and those are the 4 top spending categories. You can see that 21-22 is just a little bit higher in most areas than 2021 in this budget. And that's to be expected based on increased costs, salary increases, benefit increases, BOCES increases, et cetera. The debt service is actually pretty flat. And that's because, of course, this year we've already been paying down the capital project on a bond anticipation note, which isn't the final bond, but it's the temporary bond. BAN, that's what we've been calling BAN all this time, bond anticipation note. Now, school budgets are always divided into these 3 categories, and every school district does it this way. So we want to make sure that we're presenting it to you in this way. There's an administrative component, there's a capital component, and there's a program component. The program component is where teaching and learning comes in, as well as some other pieces that are important to teaching and learning, like transportation, right? So what you see here is that the administrative budget is a little over $1.5 million. That's only 7.68% of the whole entire budget, at least at this point in the development. That percentage down below, that's an increase over last year's administrative budget. The capital component is 13.83% of our budget for a total of a little over $2.8 million. That's a little lower than this year. And then the program component, and again, this is the largest one. This is the one where we focus on students, is a little over $16.1 million. And that's 3.84% higher than last year. You can see those numbers also at the bottom of the detailed budget for each area. So we always sort of wait on the numbers to come in, and we've actually received a lot of those numbers up to this point. We know what the CPIU is. It's 1.23%. We know what other numbers that contribute to the tax cap calculation, the tax growth factor, 0.0056. We know the executive budget state aid amounts, didn't put the number in here, but it's that number I gave you before, 3.3 or so million dollars. We know that the teachers' retirement system, that's the pension. We know what that number is. It's 9.8%. We know what the support staff CSCA pension numbers is. That's ERS. That's 16.2%. We already know the health insurance increase because that decision was made last week, and so our health insurance costs are going to increase by 2%, and that low increase has been consistent over the course of a number of years. We're really fortunate there, and it has a lot to do with our being self-insured as a school district or as a consortium of school districts. So 2% increase, I bet we're the envy of the country for that one, and that's really pretty remarkable. Our insurance is doing quite well. In other words, we're in better shape than we've ever been. We also know what our actual salary increases are because our negotiations were out of the way. So some of you participated in that. We completed those last year, so we now know over the course of 3 years what the salary increases will be. We know what our building aid is because we're getting that information from our bond people, that's fiscal advisors. Hopefully that'll be, we expect that to be the same number that shows up on the legislative state run later in the year. We still don't know the tax cap final, but Dana's calculated what it is. So I think he'll tell you it's 99% sure, that 1.6 something percent number. We don't know our BOCES costs yet. Those don't come until March. We don't know the final state aid amounts because those will be finalized later. And we don't know how much fund balance to use because that's really a great decision for this group to make. So that's one of the reasons for providing you with some information and some options. What's included in this budget? We did discuss some of these recently. There's a special education teacher, additional special education teacher, and additional special ed teaching assistant included here because we know our student needs are increasing next year. We have some technology in there like the upgrade of the district server. We have funding that has been consistent for most years, although this year we really didn't spend it because of the pandemic. That includes professional development money. We really did not spend money on conferences and other workshops for our staff this year, but that money's still in the budget. Summer school's in the budget, even though we had a very, very small summer school last year rather than the usual program. Money for the summer school program, the usual summer school program is in there. We continue with our 1 day per week family visitation coordinator. This year that's grant funded. We hope that grant will continue, but if not, we've budgeted that in. And then I say others TBD because there's a lot more in the budget than those. Those are just some things that I know that we've talked about in recent times. So then we get into the details. Schedule. It's going to talk about the budget details, and that's the line by line budget. It's going to talk about, whoops, let me go back here. Going to talk about revenue and some options. That's what 2 versions means. And he's going to talk about the major categories of spending. So I'm going to stop and hand this over to Dana before I does anybody have a pressing question you want to ask? Or if you ask me, I might know the answer, and Dana's sure to know the answer. So anybody want to ask a question to me before I move on?
Yeah, I just have
okay.
I guess maybe it was in the calendar. Just a couple questions. When is the latest that we can vote on the budget this year?
Mm-hmm.
And then are we still planning on voting, doing that by mail?
So we're April 20th is the date. Okay.
Yep.
And we haven't decided because last year we were told that we had to do it that way.
Okay.
So we're still discussing it. We're still trying to figure out voting machines versus hand voting. We have some things to figure out still.
Okay.
Anything else before I hand over to Dana? Okay, I'm going to stop this share. And I'm going to mute, and then when I do, then Dana will come on. Yes, Dana? Yes?
Yes.
Somebody's got to turn the speaker on.
Can everyone see the tax levy? Excellent. So what I'll do is just kind of drill down on some of the numbers that Roger shared. This first is how we come up with the 1.68 tax levy. This is a formula that the state puts together, and when you look at it, it builds out the tax levy, the growth factor, which is given to us every year. And if you can remember last year, the growth factor was 0.0044. So it is an increase from last year. And what I did learn is that is really based on truly the economic growth factor within our districts. So the more growth we have economically in terms of job creations, or I immediately thought of any type of business that opens up within the districts. That's is considered part of the growth factor. So the more economic growth within the districts, the larger that number is. I've seen some districts locally, we're just talking about it. They have, double the number we have because of the number of businesses that actually started up within the districts. And that drives everything. The higher that number is, that does allow us to increase. It's one of the factors in the tax levy. So when we have expansion in business in our community, that number will go up. We got the pilots. It's a $4,000. That's been pretty consistent over the number of years. That hasn't changed. We look at prior year exemptions. We look at that. If you look at the second page of the document, let me flip it so you can see it. That's where that second page comes in. So basically it's looking at all of our debt service. So all of our debt service, we can exclude. So we put in all of our debts and say, this is how much we're spending, $1.4, $1.7 million. And we can exclude that in terms of our tax levy. It actually allows our tax levy to, in some cases, go above the 2% when the CPIU is close. So if the CPIU was at 2, and then we have the exclusions, we could actually have a larger tax levy increase over the 2%. And that's where I think there's a lot of confusion when people hear, well, you have a 2% tax levy, you have a 2% increase, but there's the exclusions. And the exclusions, like last year, we had a 4.98% tax levy increase because of our exclusions. We could have gone upwards of 6%. So that kind of looks at what's, the second page of this document really breaks down how we come up with those exclusions. If you see there, the bus leases on the budget, on the budget's ballots, there's the proposal for leasing 2 buses or 3 buses, depending on the year. And what we pay for those leases every year, we can then tie it into our exclusion. So going back to that first page, so when we pulled all that in, we have our allowable growth factor, or the CPIU, which is the 1.23%. All of that factors into basically what is our maximum tax levy. And this year it's 1.685. As Roger was saying, that is this first proposal. One of the revenue proposals I'm throwing out there is going to the max, which you'll see is an increase of about $281,000. Very, compared to last year, it's a small tax levy increase. If you remember, I shared a document with you a couple months ago where we have the 3rd lowest tax levy within the region. We were sitting at 1.24, 1.25 this current year. And when I did that survey of all the districts in the region, we were the 3rd lowest. So really, when you look at it, comparatively speaking, we have a pretty low tax levy. Our neighbor to the other, Sable, I think their tax levy is basically double of ours. And they are the adjoining district. Saranac Lake is right around the $10 mark. So a little higher than ours, but not a double. Questions on how we determine the tax levy? All right, we'll move on to the next document. So I did want to include what that would mean if we kept the tax levy based on the 1.68. You're really looking at, a 12-cent increase on a $100,000 home. So this is the tax schedule that we typically will put out there as well, so people can see what it would mean. So when you look at it, someone that doesn't have basic star and enhanced star, a $300,000 home, you're looking at about a $36 increase over this past year's budgets. And then if you got the star, that changes. That $270,000 home, that increase is only $32. And then the enhanced star. So this is what it would look like in terms of the actual tax levy, but that the final number doesn't get determined until basically August anyway. Once the final tax roll comes in, these are all estimated numbers. It all depends in the end what the tax roll comes in, what is our overall value of property within the community. At this point, the number that we had at the end of last year that we set it at was basically $2.3 billion in change is what the value is for our property within the community, within the districts. I do believe that has gone up just about every year in the last 5 or 6 years. So I think it does get reevaluated each year. Questions on this tax schedule? The next document is the large documents. This is basically the appropriations. So if I pull it all the way up, what I've done is this year it's slightly different. I've broken it down by the components, the administrative, capital, and program, as Roger had pointed out. In fact, one of the documents I've given you shows what that is. Rather than showing you line by line, this is what you would we would put in the budget booklets, where it kind of brings it all together under the 3 program components. I'm not going to go down line by line, but you can see where all the increases is. And if you look at it primarily across the board, where there's an increase, it's probably tied to a salary or a health benefits or retirement benefits, TRS, ERS. There are very few actual increases in materials and supplies. Roger mentioned one is district server. We're allocating about $15,000 more in that line because, as you remember, at the end of August, we had a little issue with our servers getting breached and basically had to rebuild them. The servers that we currently have are 10 to 12 years old. So we're in the process of figuring out what our needs are and upgrading those hopefully for the start of next year. But it was considered a high priority upgrading our servers so that we hopefully wouldn't have that problem going forward. So we are allocating a little money on that end. It's hopefully seen as like a one-time expense for this current year. Roger did also mention that, keeping, it's really not an increase because it was in the budget last year, is the additional 1 day a week in terms of that home visits. It is in the budget, but Part of that is offset by a grant. So if the grant isn't there, we will still be able to maintain that service as well. But I don't want to, really don't want to go down through, look at each one line by line. Really what it comes down to is that bottom line at the very end. It's a $20,562,000 budget, an increase of a little less than 3% for that. And again, the majority of that is tied into salaries and benefits. Everything else is staying pretty consistent.
Well done.
You can kind of see, well, I'm going to show you this first before revenue. So this is really that breakdown that Roger was showing you, where the changes are. And, the capital of 2%, that's really just an adjustment in terms of our new debt service. As is tweaking as we get into paying the new bonds once that comes in, and hopefully going forward, that is going to be a pretty consistent number year in, year out. And we're not going to see any large fluctuations there, so that we'll see that going forward about the same every year, between $1.5 to $1.7 million we'll be spending each year on our debt service. The BOCES, as Roger mentioned, it's a 3% increase because they haven't shown us what their budget is and what their anticipated increases. So this is kind of a best guess scenario. Could be higher, hopefully not. Hopefully it's lower, but you'll see everything else is pretty standard. Salaries, not even 2%. Benefits are a little higher, and that is, part of that is even though it's only 2% for health insurance, factoring in the potential for people that take a leave and we have to hire someone for 10 weeks, 20 weeks to fill that leave, we offer them benefits. So trying to anticipate some of these potential add-ons. Just to give you an example, we had 4 employees that up until January of this year did not take our health benefits. And just like that, they went to family benefits. And it's not something that isn't necessarily budgeted because they haven't taken it in years. But they decided to switch and take our health benefits starting in January when the open enrollment period. So kind of factoring that in, little things like that you don't necessarily can budget for because you don't know if someone's going to say, hey, we haven't taken it in 10 years, but now we want it. And they have every right to do so. So we need to kind of anticipate changes like that. So in the end, what you'll see from here is really dollar-wise at this first draft is $584,000 increase from previous years. 2.92% increase. And again, it's been a pretty straight across the board in terms of materials and supplies, and really just maintaining our programs, maintaining the people that we have, and covering the increases in salaries and the increases in benefits and retirements, because you did see a little increase there. It's the first time that ERS has increased their number in 5 or 6 years. We've been budgeting 15.5% for ERS for, I would probably say 5 to 7 years. And this year it's going up to 16.2%. Not a huge increase, but it's an increase nonetheless that we have to anticipate. Questions on the major categories or the breakdown, or if you want to see something differently in terms of how the information is provided, absolutely would entertain anything.
I had a question on a specific.
Sure.
I just curious as to what the allocated insurance was in the administrative. It's only
That's
10,000 when it went up, but I was just curious. It just struck me as a 13% increase.
That is actually our insurance for the districts. And really what's happened is over the years, it hasn't quite been budgeted correctly. So even though it looks like a large increase, in reality is I'm really just trying to write what has typically happened, because that is our insurance through Utica National that we get through Gordon Pratt. It covers student accident as well, but it's also our car or in buses and transportation. So that's a bulk of it. So really what I tried to do over the last couple of years is when I've seen budget lines that typically are under budgeted, I try to fix it so that it is being budgeted correctly. So that's kind of where you see why you see that jump there as well. It's just in terms of what we have typically paid in the past. Not that just because it hasn't been budgeted properly doesn't mean that we don't cover it, because the last couple of years we've had a surplus. It's just kind of tying it so that the budget line accurately reflects what we're actually paying. And we end up paying about $85,000 a year insurance. Did I answer your question, Brian? Now revenue. So here is the breakdown of the revenue. You'll see the 1 point, it rounds it to 1.69. It's 1.685. So it automatically rounds it up. Our pile is in there. You'll see that I've decreased the interest. We're seeing that. We had a nice bump last year because of all the money that we took in that kind of sat in our sweep accounts for the ban. Well, that's coming to an end. I think we only have about $4 million left in our capital project in terms of the money in the sweep accounts. So that will be going away. Plus rates are lower. So I've decided to adjust that down. Just like if you look at it, most of the revenue sources that are they fluctuate from year to year, I've adjusted down. The tuition, student fees, that's been budgeted for $1,000, and we haven't in 5 years brought in $1,000. So I decided to just bring it down to zero. Interest earned on our investments, that's the same thing there. Our refund for BOCES services, I suspect is going to be lower. Our services are there, but with curriculum development not being used as widely, we do get a good portion of it through BOCES. Our teachers use BOCES services, and that's not happening. So I don't envision as big of a refund in BOCES as well. Let's see, other negatives, when you look at it, the textbook, computer, library, those are a little misleading because the governor's executive budget proposal lumped all of them together into one line. And they're not really broken out to be an accurate comparison from year to year. So basically, I just kind of looked at what the percentage was last year based on the dollar amount that he put in there. BOCES aid was lumped in there as well. So he took BOCES aid, transportation, textbook, computer, library, and he kind of lumped them all together into one category. And so I kind of broke it out the best I can. So even though they say there's a decrease, in the end, as Roger mentioned, through the governor's proposal right now, we're seeing an actual increase in potential state aid. And the driving factor there is the other state aid. And you'll see that third from the bottom line, the COVID and building. We are getting a little over $300,000 from the federal government. That has already been passed. That is not something that it's wishful thinking. It's actually what was passed in December of last year. That is our allocation. It's not tied to Title I. That should be coming to us at some point, but the governor has decided rather than to give it to districts for this current year, he's holding on to it and he is rolling it out and he's going to allocate it for next year's budgets. So when you see that increase in state aid, a good portion of that increase is actually a result of what we're getting from the federal government. He's actually, if you drill down, the actual state aid that we're getting is actually a little less than what he proposed last year. But that is offset from the money we're going to get from the federal government in terms of an increase. So he's pulling back a little bit from actual state aid, and that's being offset in an actual increase from the federal dollars that are coming. So that's why you see that also that $1 million is an indicator in terms of our building aid as well. Last year's budget, I did factor in what our building aid would be if the project was completed. As you know, it hasn't been completed, but we did get the okay for early aid release. So we should be getting our building aid, full building aid for the project this year as well as next year's. So that is anticipated. But really, if you look at that one line, that biggest increase is because of the money we're getting from the federal government. And also to say that the governor's proposal is based on the assumption that at the very least in any new aid package that the federal government passes, that's the state will get at least $6 billion. So all of his numbers are based on what he called worst case scenario of $6 billion, best case scenario of $15 billion. So there is still a possibility, I guess, that we don't get this, we being the states, do not get any money from the federal government. And now that's worst case scenario of 6 billion actually becomes even worse because we don't get anything from the federal government. He's hoping, and he built his numbers off of worst case, but if it's best case scenario and we get anything over 6 billion, that will fund other things. I don't necessarily think that we would get additional money unless the legislatures in their budget process decide to increase funding for schools. And then as Roger mentioned, at this point in time right now, the appropriated fund balance usage is a little over $71,000. I think the last time we talked about the budgets back in January, I threw out a number of about $600,000 as a possibility of using. But in reality, when you look at it in terms of all of our knowns, we're not there. Unless we decide, if you guys decide that you want to earmark money for other things that aren't currently in the budget, then the fund balance could be used. The second one I gave you is just to kind of give you a compare, kind of saying here are the options here. The first one looks at using the max tax levy of 1.69. This one scenario says keeping the tax levy the same and not increasing our taxes at all, and the levy stays zero. And how do we maintain a balanced budget by doing that? And the only thing that changes is the real property tax number stays the same, and the appropriated fund balance makes up the difference of the $281,000 to balance the budget. You're really just shifting where the money's coming from. But I thought I would show you both scenarios and let you guys think about the direction you want to go in terms of that. Questions on the revenue?
Yeah. So my question is on the student tuition and the rental property. Just curious as to why we anticipate getting $0 for the 2021-22 school year.
Right now, I would say there's hopeful that not Ironman, summits will be here this summer. We do generate a little revenue from there, but not a lot. The Summit Lacrosse basically is money in, money outs. The money we get from there, we actually basically pay outs in terms of maintaining our fields. A good portion of that rental property usually comes by way of Ironman, and Ironman will not be on the oval this year. As you know, Orta is planning to start ripping the oval up come March, beginning of April, and will not be in use. So Ironman, if it does happen, will be staging somewhere else. So given that known issue with Ironman, as well as still unknown with the Summit Lacrosse, which are our two biggest rentals, I thought it was safe to go with 0 because the likelihood of them not happening here, one is a definite, the other is a maybe, but it's not really a revenue maker for us. And Liam, you asked about the tuition and fees like there, and that one really is up and down every year. It's in reality an unknown. It depends on the number of kids that decide to come from outside the district that want to come to school here. Again, I felt it's to be more to be conservative in that because we typically do not actually get to where we budget every year on that number. We don't have a list of students that we know ahead of time as we're building the budgets that are going to be coming here from out of district and what that would generate for revenue. So I went with a conservative approach on those lines.
I have a couple comments. First of all, congratulations on keeping the admin budget so lean. This is very much in the weeds. I shouldn't even say it, but I'm going to say it. 15,000 seems pretty modest for a server. And I have a question. Is exclusion sort of equivalent to a personal tax deduction?
For the tax levy? Yeah, so when you look at it, it is like a tax deduction. So the state says, here's your CPIU and your growth factor. So they give you that when you go back to, let's see if I think keeps dropping down. Oh. So when you go back to this, Martha, and you look at, here's our adjusted prior year levy, and you'll see that's the 1.5 is the exemptions. So when
I think we're not seeing your screen, Dana.
somehow it.
Get your screen again.
Oh wait, yep. I must have clicked the unshare button. My apologies. There we go. So when you look at that, yes, that's basically like a tax deduction if we want to, for taxes. So we can exclude it and we pull it out so that's in the end, our tax levy, when you have a larger debt service, you will generally have a larger tax allowable levy because the state is kind of giving you credits for the debt that you have and the debt that you're paying. So it kind of pays to have debts in one sense because your allowable levy can be higher. And there are some districts I'm hearing around the North Country, their allowable levy is actually going to be a negative number, which kind of tells me that they probably don't have, they probably do not have a lot of debt service. Not to mention their growth factor is probably low on top of a lower CPIU. So all of those factors are probably making it so that they have an actual negative levy. But I don't see that. I don't even envision that happening for us for years, because we're going to have a 1.5 to $1.7 million debt service for the next 15 years because of the capital projects. It'll fluctuate a little bit because we have a fewer bonds that will come off in a couple of years, but those are small amounts. So we will see some adjustments in the debt service, probably a matter of $100,000 to $200,000 over the next 5 years. But it'll be pretty consistent for the life of our bond. So I look at it as this is probably going to be, roughly speaking, where our tax levy is going to be in the foreseeable future, because our debt service is going to be pretty consistent. And then the question, you also said the 15,000. There was $5,000 already in that line, so it's a budget line of $20,000 for the server. Joe, our IT person, he believes that's kind of the dollar amount. He feels good that that's probably where it is. He's been working with Dell in terms of configurations, but that is the number that he kind of gave as a pretty good chance that it's going to be in that $20,000 range. So we already have $5,000 budgeted that's been in that line, and we're just increasing it to 15. Obviously, if he gets something back in the next couple of weeks and it's a $30,000, then I will adjust so that we can cover it, because it is one of those items that's it's kind of a must at this point to upgrade our district servers.
And then finally, if we go with the second scenario that you presented regarding revenue, where the appropriated fund balance goes into the 350,000 range, and we don't increase taxes, that seems really appealing. And I wonder what our fund balance would be minus that figure. I just don't know in my head what it is.
Well, right now we are sitting at about a fund balance of about 11 or 12%. If I can remember correctly, it was about $2 million in terms of a fund balance. We're able to maintain at least 4% for this current budget. That was a little under $800,000 for this next year's budget. If the number stayed the same at 20.562 million, then our allowable fund balance in terms of 4% would be $822,000 and change. So when you look at that in terms of using $352,000 in the fund balance, it is definitely, I would say, it's there. The only potential concern would be, as I was talking about this year, we'll see a potential increase in state aid because of the federal money. But a lot of people are talking about this coming year as potentially a cliff, a fiscal cliff, because we're seeing a bump up because of the federal money, but it's 1 year money. And the state has already, in his executive proposal, has already decreased the state's contribution. People are concerned that next year he will start with the lower number as opposed to what last year's numbers were. So we would already be starting at it wasn't quite 2% decrease in state aid directly from the states for next year. So just like that, we would go from an increase of this year, largely built around the federal money, to an automatic decrease in state aid next year because of the new numbers that is in this current proposal. So people are really, at least the other business officials up here, they are maintaining that they will try to keep a fund balance as high as they possibly can. And their board allows them to, so that's anticipating maybe not this year, but in next year or the year after where you see the true correction of the pandemic hitting. So that is just my concern. I give you both because it is a great topic to discuss.
Thanks, Dana.
Dana, quick question on Medicaid assistance. Is that a special ed?
Yes, that's our stack, correct. And one of the things we've seen, we have, so our threshold has gone up every year the last couple of years, not by a lot, but the threshold that they set, as well as we do not have any students out of district at this point, and they were a large driver when we had 3 students going to the Plattsburgh's BOCES. And they drove up some of their reimbursables because of that, and that directly affects the Medicaid. Not to say that you can't get reimbursables with maintaining the service within the district. Absolutely, you can, and I think that's one of the things that we have tried to strive to do is keep our kids here, and that's one of the reasons why we're looking to add a special ed teacher, because we still have some higher need students. And quite honestly, I think our kids are better equipped to be here within the district than having them shipped to Plattsburgh. And if we can provide them the service they need, then we do it in-house. It saves all around. And at the same time, we will see a little decrease in that with the Medicaid assistance because of it. But when we look at this, I think they look at us as we're fairly well-to-do districts when it comes to aid, and that number keeps growing and going up in terms of our cutoff number.
Thank you.
Yep. Other questions? Well, I guess I'll turn it back over to Roger because I think he has some things in terms of looking ahead and stuff like that for our next meeting.
Great, thanks, Dana. It'll just take another minute and then we'll open up to any further questions. Let me just go back to the PowerPoint. Okay, so Dana just talked about these big issues in the detailed budget. You're going to see these again and again, so you'll have opportunity. You have all the documents if you want to study them, read them on your own, and come to us with questions. That would be welcome. Just something to think about. And again, this is something new this year, and we recognize that with the pandemic, with the crisis, we've had a lot of different things going on, and with the world as it is. We don't necessarily address those in this first draft budget, but you as a board and we as a district still have time in developing this budget to think about new ideas. So for example, we have a diversity initiative going on right now. Our committee meets regularly. There are some ideas in there about how to move the district forward that haven't yet been finalized, but we should expect that that's going to happen. In there, we've also talked about with Jeanette Dugan's sabbatical, the idea of actually offering classes through the social studies program. Our social studies program, however, is limited by our staffing, right? So in order to move forward on the academic side of diversity initiative, we would probably need an additional social studies teacher. We've talked about that in the past. And of course, that's always been one item too far. But that would be something we could do if we wanted to move forward with the academic side of the diversity initiative. I know that the DEI committee will also probably have some other ideas to promote, and like I said, they meet regularly. So those ideas aren't in this budget, but they could be within the time frame. Meals. We're not budgeting in here for free meals for all students. However, this year we're offering free meals for all students because the federal government was able to provide that. If we wanted to provide additional support for meals, not in here yet, it would have to be something that we as a district wanted to do. More technology. Right now, we're doing pretty good. We're taking all those devices that we've got in the district and using them with students so that we have in a very practical sense, a one-to-one initiative going on out there. And that's because of remote instruction. If we wanted to build on that and, really prioritize that one-to-one approach by devices, we would need more money in the technology budget. Again, the technology budget is pretty similar to last year. So we would have to put that in. And then there might be other ideas that I'm not mentioning here that has come out of the past year of discussion and experience from our school board and our school community. As far as how would we pay for those, well, there's really going to be two ways to pay for them. One is going to be the way Dana just described. If we lowered the tax levy increase to zero, the remaining amount would come out of the fund balance. That would be the case here too. The fund balance is pretty significant, so that would be one way to go. The other way to go is to reduce spending in other areas. So again, you might be thinking about some of these initiatives that we've talked about, and maybe we haven't, revisited it lately, but it might come attached with some costs. Might want to do that. I remind the board a few years ago, we were talking about addressing the opportunity gap. It was in a board meeting when our board member said, how do we help our students pay for the SAT? And decided to put a number into the budget to cover the costs of the SAT so that every student at least once would have an opportunity to get the SAT covered for free. It wasn't particularly costly in the great scheme of things, but it wasn't in the budget. It has to be put in there. So if there's new ideas that we've generated or you've thought about, or it's in these next drafts that you really want to make sure that you bring those to the table, and we can talk about how to do them and how to pay for them if we're able to. So new ideas, something for you to think about. That's maybe more fun than going through the 300 lines. I don't know, maybe. And then in terms of looking ahead, again, you've got the budget calendar, so this isn't really new. Tonight's the 16th. This is our first draft. On March 1st, the tax levy limit is submitted. We'll have our second draft in about a month, March 16th. Our final draft a couple of weeks after that. This is all planned. We can always do more. In terms of board candidates, remember the budget is also attached to board elections. So April 19th is the date for petitions being due for board candidates. Okay, you know who you are. As far as the budget adoption goes, that's the last date there is April 20th. Fortunately, that comes after spring break, not in the middle like it's been in past years. And then we have budget hearings, and finally the vote on May 18th. So this budget calendar is long. You might remember last year, it was then extended another month, right? So we're still in the pandemic. We don't exactly know what executive orders will come down, but right now we're anticipating, we're planning for a traditional budget calendar without that extension or without a requirement to do it all by absentee ballot. That's where we are. In terms of community feedback, remember the budget, as I said at the start, is a community effort as well. We have open meetings. It's based on community input from strategic planning. We do welcome feedback in person and via email. I guess that in person maybe isn't quite so true this year, mostly through email. And then of course you as board members represent the community, and so you bring their concerns to our budget discussions as well. Finally, in very formal ways, we have budget hearings and then the budget election. So the budget is not just an internal operation. This is the community at work, and there are many ways for community members to be heard. And this is a public document. We put on here the LP District Clerk at lakeplacidcsd.net email. That's a great way for people to send their information. If they send it to us that way, we will share it with board members, all of the board members at the earliest possible opportunity. And of course, all of these documents are public in board docs. So the fact that you're looking at them now, so can our community members look at them. So people's questions or comments are welcome, as are your questions and comments right now, in case you haven't had a chance to ask them or speak them. Any questions or comments from board members? Okay, well, you will have more opportunities to talk about the budget in the near future. Thanks, everybody.
Great. Thank you very much. Last chance, anybody? Okay. Next up is for the good of the cause. No emails received from the start of the meeting, correct? Okay, okay,
Well, we might want to mention here.
Right.
We did receive emails that were specific for the sports discussion scheduled for later, and those are posted in that sports area. So if you haven't had a chance to look at them, you'll either have to look at them during the meeting or we'll have to stop and read them.
did everybody hear that? There are emails and documents that came in today regarding the sports, high-risk sports. So you can either go in, it's under the sports section, correct?
Yeah.
Yes, the emails that have been copied off. So there's some relatively new ones in there. So. All right, moving along, reports to the board. Dana, budget status report.
Oh, I'm up again. All right. Budget status report. Hopefully everyone has had a chance to look at the budget performance update. If you look at it for the month of January, I saw a favorable increase of about $220,000 in revenue. We generally don't get that kind of money this time of year in terms of increase in revenue. But really what's driving that is the refund we got back from the health consortium. Just about that amount. We got a check at the end of December, and then again one just not too long ago. So really, that is really kind of driving that favorable status for revenue. This time of year, usually we're not bringing in a lot of revenue. State aid really doesn't start coming in until March. So this is a good sign that about $200,000 coming in from the one-time refund from the Health Consortium. As Roger mentioned, Health Consortium has been doing fairly well, has a very healthy fund balance, and they thought this was a good opportunity to kind of give money back to the districts during a tough financial year. So that was our portion of it. Looking at our expenditures, an increase of about $28,000 over last year. That's a minor increase from when you look at the overall budget standpoint. Year to date, our revenue is slightly down from this time last year, about $127,000, which is not, it's not unusual at this time of year in terms of that. Our expenditures are still trending down. We're not quite to 50% of what has been budgeted for expense as compared to 60% from last year. And again, a large that is attributed to a reduced spending this year because of COVID. We're not doing all of the extra field trips and bus trips for sports runs and things like that. So when I looked at, just to give you a perfect example, I was looking at overtime for transportation, and to date, we've only spent about $4,500 in overtime for transportation, and we're halfway through the year. We budget about $20,000 a year for that, and just showing you that example of, well, where are we not spending? It's little things like that that add up. If you look at the bottom, basically we are still projecting a surplus again for this coming year. And again, that is at this point expected. The only thing that we're really derailed at is if the state will decide and reverse what they've recently said in terms of all schools getting all of their aid, that they change their mind and hold some back. But at this point, I'm looking at it as we're probably, we're still, 5 months out, but I do project that we will have a surplus again this year. Questions on the budget performance through January? Treasury report. Yeah, what you're seeing here is the way it's been the last few months. We got a considerable amount of money in the cash sweep. About $11 million is from our revenue coming in. About $4 million is the capital project. And I was talking about that in the budget session, that that money is slowly going down. But we're still sitting fairly healthy. Really, the other big point is the $704,000 in terms of outstanding checks. It's sort of been the trend these last couple of months where we've had considerable amount of outstanding checks with these reports. And again, it kind of goes back to the timing as to when we are cutting checks. Our claims auditor has not been as available as in the past because of the COVID issues and things like that, and just being accessible. So we haven't been able to kind of have warrants every 2 weeks. And like end of December, it was December 29th when we cut checks. January was kind of towards the end of the month. So that's where you're seeing these last few months larger than typical of outstanding checks, is because of the timing of all that. But if you look at it, our bank accounts are healthy. We are very fortunate and very blessed that even though revenue hasn't come in as readily as in the past because of holding state aid and stuff like that, we've been blessed that we have the money in hand that we can pay our bills and not miss out on things, and it's not putting undue stress on us financially, because we do have a healthy bank account. Any questions?
All right, thank you very much.
Yep.
Superintendent's report.
Thanks, Rick. I just want to mention a few things tonight, and I'll start with school news. So we've been off for these past 3 days. When we come back, Thursday is, as I mentioned at our last meeting, is our altered but still exciting Winter Carnival celebration. So Thursday is Winter Carnival Decade Day, and Friday is Winter Carnival Activity Day. Of course, it's going to be a shortened Winter Carnival celebration, and many of the activities and ceremonies are virtual. This year's theme, as I mentioned before, is Blast from the Past, and our high schools are representing, or high school classes are representing different decades. The seniors, the 60s, the juniors, the 70s, the sophomores, the 80s, and the freshmen, the 90s. Middle school classes are going to participate as well in terms of wearing class colors. So the 6th grade will be wearing black, the 7th grade purple, and the 8th grade orange. A lot of things aren't going on for Winter Carnival, but we are celebrating Winter Carnival. And I wish all of our students and faculty well with that effort. In other issues, as Dana mentioned, we do expect to see the Oval beginning construction in the month of March. So stay tuned for that. And then we'll come back on Thursday, and then looking ahead, we'll have 5.5 weeks of school before spring break, which begins this year in the last couple of days of March. So that's what we're looking at. That's number one. Number two, I want to talk a little bit about quarantines. These seem to be important issues these days in our school, right? So as you know, we were forced to close both of our schools on Friday due to positive cases at both schools. And what happens there is, not only do we have a person who has tested positive for COVID-19, but we have the circumstances which force others to quarantine. So I wanted to share that with you and also let you know that some of these quarantine rules are changing, and they're changing in a way that might reduce the level of disruption in the schools. So I'm just going to go over them briefly. I've been sharing these with faculty and staff, and we did follow these changes in this last experience. So let's see. Well, here's the brief summary. So first of all, the length of each quarantine has been reduced. It used to be 14 days. Now it's 10 days as long as people don't show symptoms. That's number one. Number two, people who have tested positive within the past 3 months no longer have to quarantine. That wasn't always the case. So there are instances where people who would normally have quarantined in this situation did not quarantine because of that. Number three, and this is a brand new piece that isn't quite finalized, but fully vaccinated individuals with at least 2 weeks since their last shot will no longer need to be quarantined. Now, I thought that was a done deal, but actually today I heard that that's not yet documented in the proper way. So they're waiting for that documented piece to come out before that's implemented. But that should really change things because many of our faculty and staff members are either in the process of being vaccinated or have received their second shots. So while this doesn't impact students, unfortunately, it will change what happens to staff, and it's the staff quarantines that force us to remain closed. And just so you know, right now, we're hoping to reopen both schools on Thursday, but we haven't quite accounted for all the missing stuff. We had to quarantine 15 staff members at the elementary school as a result of the last positive case. And so to be able to cover those spots is very challenging. And so we'll be finalizing that decision tomorrow. If we're not able to open, it's because we really couldn't cover the staff. So the impact on staff, the vaccinations, and then the ability to not quarantine if there's some kind of contact is a big deal in terms of remaining open. So we do hope to see positive changes continue as we go with these quarantines. Who's quarantined? I'm just going to I'll name three categories of people who are quarantined. People who are quarantined are people who have had direct contact with a person who tests positive. By direct contact, I'm talking about physical contact, right? So that quarantines somebody. So if there's a positive person and somebody, if there's been, some kind of physical contact, then that leads to a quarantine. The second group is probably the group that we look at mostly in school. These are called close contacts. Close contacts are defined as people who are within 6 feet for 10 minutes or more of a person who tests positive. So close contacts have to quarantine, and they quarantine whether or not they're wearing a mask. And we all know that wearing a mask is safer than not wearing a mask, but for the quarantine rules, it doesn't seem to make a difference. So close contacts get quarantined. The third group is the one where we've had some significant changes. So this is called proximate contact. Proximate contact, these are people who are in the same room with somebody who's positive, but not within 6 feet for 10 minutes, not that close contact piece. Up until this most recent case, these most recent cases, we have been automatically quarantining, based on county health, state health rules, automatically quarantining everybody in the room because they're considered proximate contacts. But the rules are changing there, and we did apply those this time, and I imagine we'll continue to apply these. The rules are changing where it no longer is 100% necessary to quarantine people who are proximate contacts. Have not been wearing masks, for example, when they're eating lunch, right? They can't wear a mask when they're eating lunch. So the lunchtime cohorts would still and are still being quarantined in these circumstances. And then also if movement and grouping of a lesson, for example, makes it hard to determine whether or not we had close contacts. Imagine a kindergarten classroom or a gym class, right? So when those things are difficult to figure out, then the cautious step, and we always do this in consultation with the health department, the cautious decision is to quarantine. And then there may be some other risky circumstances where you would still quarantine proximate contacts. I can't name what they all are, but every situation is looked at on its own. So that's where the quarantine situation is. And I just want everyone to remember that, we work hard at the quarantine piece, even though it's not our job, right? Our job is to teach kids and to keep kids safe, to make sure they're following protocols. But the county health department relies heavily on our information. So we look close, we talk with them regularly, constantly almost. I was on with them today. And we identify these circumstances, we share this information with them, they issue the quarantine orders. And if there's questions about, a very specific circumstance, we go to them with that because we're not, again, the ones who have the legal authority to quarantine people. We don't quarantine people, the county health public officials do, but we contribute all this information and consult heavily with them. So that's where we are with quarantines. And I don't know if anybody has any questions about those.
Just a comment.
Yeah.
Our staff has experienced two situations where the vaccines have saved. They've been exposed. It was a Clinton County both times, but it really will be a great asset. So.
Thanks, Rick. So that was number 2. Number 3 has to do with an item that's later in our agenda, and that has to do with the administrative retirement. And I just thought, since I have the floor, I would take it now and leave it after this. So I just wanted to make some comments because that letter is mine, and that letter represents my retirement at the end of this year. So I'm just going to read. And essentially, I want to reiterate some of the comments that are in my retirement letter, which you get to see and not everybody does. I'm not reading the letter, but I just want to add some comments. So I want everyone to know that being the superintendent of our district has been the greatest professional honor of my career. Being offered this position 8 years ago was something I never imagined was ever going to happen, and yet it happened, and I became the superintendent of this school district. And then for these past 8 years, this has been a powerful driving force in my life, and it has shaped my life just as I know our district has been shaped as well. So making this decision to retire was very difficult and came with much soul searching. So tonight, I just want to say thank you. I want to thank, we'll start with my family for putting up with the late nights, the very early mornings, and for supporting their sometimes stressed out father and husband. Thank you to my family. I want to thank our school families and our community for supporting me and supporting our district throughout these 8 years by voting yes on the budgets that we've passed without fail and on the capital project that we're just about to complete, and just for being great partners in educating all of our students. I want to thank our staff and our faculty for accepting me as their superintendent, and then for allowing me to represent them at times as the face and the voice of the school district. But I want you all to know that any success of my own is truly a reflection of them and their outstanding work. So thank you to our faculty and staff. And I, of course, want to thank our students. Our students honor me every day with their friendly hellos, their hard work, and their ambition to improve their lives through education, which is that piece that makes doing this job so rewarding. And finally, I want to thank you, our wonderful Board of Education, for trusting in me these past 8 years. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And that's everything.
Thank you very much.
Bravo, bravo.
We'll move right past that and go to information for the board. Is there a sports update? I know it was listed in there, but
A capital project update.
it said sports update, and then there's a winter carnival. That's old. Okay. in the information for the board is a blast from the past, which is the Winter Carnival information. It's an information packet. If you didn't have the opportunity to look at it, please do. Anything else anybody has for information? Okay. Linking goals with the agenda items. I turn to Martha.
I walked
didn't-
right into that, didn't
Well,
I?
I'll start.
Okay.
Go
Here's
Bluey.
Martha's handy dandy little one sheet here. So I am meant to have a cheat sheet.
I didn't hear what Daniel said.
Drop the ball. All right. I think the public budget discussions and making those documents, it's community involvement. And thank you, Martha, for the cheat sheet.
Yeah. I agree about community involvement there, and then our awareness of the fact that this is a public session and the documents we present are publicly available. That's reaching out to the community passively, but it is.
Also, the budget presentation would be under finance, which mentions the budget. Anybody
Yes.
else have anything? I don't want to belabor this point too long. But great. Thank you for the sheet, Martha. That should help us out. Under the discussion phase, the one and only item I believe under the discussion phase is the high-risk sports. Hopefully you've had the opportunity to read the vast amount of attachments and information that are included. Thank you very much, Roger, for that, and Karen. So I open the floor up for discussion.
So John has joined us to answer questions. Why don't I just mention a few things? We had this discussion, of course, at our last meeting, but there is a desire from our athletic community for some kind of final determination and a public announcement that they can use. And I know John's really interested in that because they're getting information from a lot of other sources as well, including the media. There were some things that came up, and maybe John will mention some of these. I'll just mention them because they came up at our last discussion. There was a question about the ice situation. To my knowledge, our two rinks, that's Saranac Lake and Lake Placid, won't be available after March 1st. So I know our coaches have mentioned that if they were to have winter sports, they would probably be seeking some kind of outdoor rink. And I don't know what that would be. In terms of season dates, this winter season for this area, Section 7 is, and John will correct me if I get any of this wrong, but I think you gave this information to me, John. The winter season ends March 26th, and that is the Friday before our spring break begins, and we have a 2-week spring break. So whenever it starts, that's where it's going to end for all schools who are participating. However, there is something called a Fall 2 season, and that Fall 2 season will include volleyball. And volleyball starts on March 29th. So that's the Monday that actually starts our spring break. Again, that's the Section 7 date. And then our spring season, and that's our traditional spring season, starts much later this year. Typically it starts in mid-March, but this time it won't start until April 26th. So those questions came up last time. John was able to share a lot of that with me, and I'm sharing it with you. Other things that, John, I'm going to mention some other items that you had shared with me. This all comes out of Section 7 and the leagues. Schools that do approve basketball will only allow one coach on the bench, no volunteers, and then the players. Also, the home team will allow just a handful of people to do the shot clock, the game clock, at the home book, and a videographer, and then one supervisor, but there won't be any fans at these events. So that would be true, I believe, also for hockey. Is that right, John?
That is
Hockey as
correct.
well.
Yes.
Okay. CVAC schools that are planning to play both there are CVA schools planning to play both hockey and basketball this year. Again, this is new information since our last time. I believe that's all of them, John, but I'm not.
Yeah,
100%
all
sure.
CVAC schools
I
are
think
going
you're
to play
muted,
both.
John, or else,
He's
or
not
else,
muted.
or,
His
oh,
speaker's
it's
on.
me, sorry.
That's
I can't-
okay. All CVAC schools are playing basketball, and the other 4 hockey schools are as well.
Gotcha,
And there's 4 MBAC schools that are playing basketball.
right. There's four MVACs. Thanks, John.
Yes.
I think that's sort of some of the nuts and bolts of what I gathered from you and me interacting on this, John. Is there anything like that that's specific that you think I missed?
No, other than the end date, the March 26th is more of a proposed end date. It doesn't have to end that way. There are schools that could play beyond that. So some schools, I think the scheduled games, if you will, when they write the league schedule, if you will go to the 26th. But some schools will elect to play beyond that because there's time in the schedule. Obviously, especially those schools that don't play a fall 2 season would likely play beyond that a little bit as well.
Right, and we bring up the fall 2 season because these rules about high-risk sports apply to all the high-risk sports, and volleyball is one of them. So in order to participate in any one of them or all of them, the school board has to vote to approve them. So that's what that's why we're bringing up volleyball right now. The same will be true of lacrosse in late April. So I'm throwing that information out there just because it came up at our last discussion. I don't need to continue to be the one talking.
John, I've got a question. I had heard that hockey was going to be non-checking. Is that?
That is correct. Yes. Yeah. So for section 7, part of the guidelines they wrote was no checking. Yes. And if I can add just a little information as well, most of the schools are starting practices this week. Some started yesterday, some today. There's a couple starting a little later, but even hockey is like there are some games scheduled for next week already for the teams that are starting now. There are a few schools that are starting a little later. Saranac Lake is starting practices on March 1st. They're going to practice. This is their basketball, where hockey still is unsure. They'll practice for a couple weeks. They'll play games for a couple weeks, and that'll be it. So it's a very tight season. Is their intention?
John, what is your comfort level with, as far as like what policies are out there that you can adopt? Because for me, I think one of the things is, when asked like, are we going to do this or not? There's a whole lot of unknowns as to how we're going to go about that. So as far as what you see with the policies that other districts are using, do you feel like those policies are sufficient to mitigate risk? Do you feel like those are something that we can implement here? Or do you feel like, the rest of them are just kind of, going for it recklessly?
No,
you don't have to make that judgment call on other districts.
That's okay. No, I think that they've made it as just about as risk-free as possible by just eliminating so many people that it will be in the venue. No fans, minimal other adults on in the gym. It just really tightens up that security piece. Obviously, there's going to be challenges still. I think keeping masks on players, in an aggressive basketball game, there's going to be some risks, but I think you can minimize those quite a bit. There is risk. It's not, obviously, if it was risk-free, this would be an easy decision. But I think that the proposals that Matt Wallentuck, the executive director of Section 7, and some committees that were put together I think are as controlling as they can be and still play. There are schools that are just practicing that are not going to play games. There's schools that are doing like an intramural piece where they'll just scrimmage, in-house. And there are schools that are just kind of doing an open gym piece. And then there are schools that are going full-fledged all the way out. So there certainly is the gamut out there. I don't know if that answered your question, but.
Yes, it does. Thanks.
Okay.
And then for hockey on ice time, if March 1st is when we're losing all of our ice, that gives you 1 week. Like what is the feasibility of playing outdoors? Which, I mean, playing outdoors would be safer than being indoors, I would suppose.
I don't think they would try to play a game. I think they would try to hold practices. So for those first couple weeks of March, I think there's a chance that ice is available after March 15th locally. I'd have to double check with Butch and Keith on that. So my guess is that they would practice on open rinks that they could find available. There are some around in the two communities. And that's their thought process. And then they would just play away games during those. If games were to take place, they would just have to play away in those weeks. Again, Saranac Lake, their board has approved playing if we do. But right now, they're also not even starting practices till March 1st. They possibly could adjust that because this is kind of hockey's kind of a unique situation. So when I was talking to their athletic director recently, and, he was going to, if we did happen to give it the okay, he would approach their board and superintendent about allowing to start, a week earlier.
If not, that's sort of a game breaker because they have the majority of the players, do they not?
Yeah. Yes. Well, I don't know if it's a game breaker. I think you could still practice, play maybe some away games, and then start playing some home on the latter half of the season, and potentially play later in. If the kids were around, they could still, play into spring break as well.
Don, I got a question in terms of hockey. I know it's usually not something I bring up, but if in the end Orta is not available and the object is, or the goal is to go to various rinks, in terms of a risk management, insurance liability. We have an insurance umbrella with Orta, so it allows our athletes, our students to go to their venues and practice and all that. But if we have a team popping up on the lake or another venue, my concern is insurance and how they are going to be covered, particularly if it's on private property.
Okay, and I certainly I wouldn't know the answer to that. And I know there are a number of facilities that the coaches are looking into, but I don't know who owns them. We haven't gotten that deep into the conversation yet. But I honestly hadn't thought about that piece.
Anyone else have questions or want to share their point of view?
I'll share my point of view. I'm not shy about that. I think that it would be really wonderful if we could give the students access to these.
Go ahead.
Just be quiet. Martha's turn.
I was just saying, with the last change to the regs on the proximity issue, it seems like that would weigh in favor of not having the sport, because then there would be any benefit we would get from having, lessening the impact of a potential quarantine would be overridden by having the proximity with the sport. I understand that correctly? Does that make sense? And then the last, you could just go back to the last quarantine, the new rules
Yes.
on the proximity, So
the proximity would say for.
I guess my question is that, is there an interplay between those two?
Right.
And does it,
So here's how that would change that. Let's say, for example, that let's take so an athlete is positive, catches COVID from another team. Okay, that's the fear. Yes.
Yep.
Okay, and brings it into the classroom. A month or two ago, the entire classroom would be quarantined for 14 days. Today, it would be fewer. I don't know how many fewer, but it would be fewer because the proximate rule has changed. So there'd be fewer people being quarantined and for a lesser time. So I think what I see is this. I think what I see you bringing up is that in some ways the quarantine rules benefit any circumstance where there's a positive case, even coming from sports. And yet, in another case, you might offset that gain. I think that's what you're saying. You might offset that gain by introducing more risk into the system. I don't know if I got that right.
that's what I was looking for, yeah.
All right, Martha, you were saying?
Roger suggested that we offer our points of view, and mine is that I'd love to see the students getting their athletics in starting now.
I'll go. I think with the changes with the proximity, the changes to the quarantine rules, and honestly, I think that more of a plan is out there for how they're going to do it. I would feel comfortable with us voting yes on winter sports. I think that the risk to our in-person education is less now than it was at the last meeting. Because definitely at the last meeting, it felt like you were just charging a bomb, waiting to blow up your in-person education. So I feel much more comfortable now with what's, with the way the current rules are.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I would go back to comments I had made regarding intramural sports. Give these students an opportunity to practice, to play at some level. Give them the flexibility to, play on the ice, outside. I think that I would be in favor of quote unquote hybrid model of that, where they still get to play, but with the less risk of mixing with other students from other schools. I also want to point out that a lot of these schools that they're playing have had substantial disruptions to their education, their in-person education, and while Lake Placid has done a better job. So I guess I also have a bit of a trust issue with these other schools.
John, could you go over the testing protocol?
I'm not sure what you mean.
There isn't one?
No.
So I think what you're talking about with the test, sorry, hold on. I think what you're talking about with the testing protocol is a Franklin County thing. So every county made up their own regulations, and Franklin County, which Saranac Lake is a part of, has in there a testing protocol. Now, just today, this is how things happen around here with this issue. They change every day. Just today, the State Education Department made a strong point that said that while schools can test players, they may not require it in order for, as a condition of participation, which I know threw a wrench into the works of what the Franklin County schools were discussing right then and there. That was about 1 o'clock this afternoon. So I don't know where that's going, and it doesn't specifically apply to Essex County requirements. It doesn't mean you can't do it. It just means it's not required in Essex County the way it was written as being required in Franklin County. And John, I don't know if you heard anything different than I did.
No, that sounds right. And I believe Clinton County was the same. That it's not required in Clinton.
Essex County had the thing in their letter where any of our athletes had to have a note from their doctor and permission to play. Is that guideline still there?
John, do you want to address that? I know Matt did address it in one of those many meetings.
Yeah, I'm trying to find it if I can find that specific email. Bear with me a moment. I'm sorry, I don't have it up front.
I know that, and I'll just talk for a little while you're looking, John. I know that Section 7, Matt Wallentuck being the coordinator, wrote a standard set of plans that school districts would follow that the other districts that have said yes have signed on to. And somehow the doctor's note that sounded so strong in that original county guidance fell right underneath, right into sort of our standard requirement for having a physical. Isn't that right, John? Something like that?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah, I remember that one going from this serious level to that serious level. Yeah.
I'm frustrated that I save all his emails and I can't seem to find that one. I get a lot from him. Yeah, it said something to the effect that except for students that are high risk because of they've either been sick or have a condition that makes them an underlying condition that makes them a higher risk of getting sick. They don't need to go to their own doctor for that. But I can't find that email, and my apologies for that. Plan B here.
One last point. So, I think our goal should be that, we look forward to the spring sports, which are outdoors, generally less contact, and, I guess I'm willing to roll the dice, and then with the spring sports where they're just, less contact outdoors. And then additionally too, we'll know how much disruption we just generally have had by the time we get to the spring. And if it's minimal, then it seems to me that willing to risk the disruption in spring with the less riskier sports, if that makes any sense.
Paul, contrary to last meeting where I was strongly opposed, I've been able to receive more input from students and constituents in general, and I'm leaning towards the supportive aspect of it. What I'm having difficulty with is the I guess partially what Dana brought up on liability. If we say, yes, let's move forward with sports, does that therefore make us obligated to provide transportation, obligated to provide, find them ice? So we're going to be traveling to Shazy for ice, availability of officials and those type of things. So I think if do go in that direction, I want it known that we can't control those elements. If we can't find a bus driver, then there's no trip going. That's just the way it'll be. So I really want that to be out there. Also, I want to express my disappointment, not that we have any control over it here, that that the other components of well-rounded education, and I mentioned this before, the arts, music, and drama still remain in quarantine. So sports seem to have, risen to the top here, but hopefully they're thinking about those other elements as well for our other students. So
Thank you for saying that.
anybody have anything? Joan, are you available? Okay. Anyone else have any comments?
If I could just throw a note out there,
So-
I got a.
Oops, sorry, John.
I'm sorry. I got a text message from one of my hockey coaches that said Tupper Lake looks to have ice, and that may be an option as well. And that might be an easier insurance piece. I just wanted to make sure I shared that information with you.
Thank you. Can we move to a vote at this point?
So I think what we need to do is vote, because it's gonna mess up the order to the consent agenda. I
Okay,
think that we should vote after we do the additional action items.
Right.
Special education.
right. Okay,
That's where I would have it.
okay. Is everybody okay with that?
I didn't hear it.
Hold
I
on.
didn't hear what Karen said.
Yes, I would have.
To Martha, to vote on this, we will vote later in the agenda, after special education.
Thanks, Dan.
Okay. Any other comments?
And I don't know. I guess I would advocate for if the board wanted to go ahead with winter sports, I would advocate with some limitations, including varsity. I guess I would advocate for varsity only, and I know that we've talked about that to limit the possibility. And I would also advocate for a short season. I understand that whoever would be allowed to play would want to get started right away. But if our neighbors are starting on March 1st, I think that could be something that we could consider as well. If we're going to move forward with it. Your points, of course, are very valid, and the potential for disruption. And I think we're in the middle of a holiday week in Lake Placid, and we know what happens, and we know that often there's a delay in the impact. And I would worry about starting something so soon afterwards that could potentially lead to that. So. Again, I don't know what the outcome will be, but I think part of our consideration could be what limitations are placed on it. And that's not to say, as you all know, that I don't value highly our youngest athletes getting a chance to play, but this is not a normal year, and I would want I would want to limit the possibilities as much as possible.
Would it be appropriate for me to make a comment here? So from the short season piece, the teams that we normally play are the MVAC teams for basketball. There are the teams that are still in is Shazy, Seton Catholic, who's also doing varsity only, by the way, Willsboro, Boquete Valley, and Bolton Landing. Now, Bolton might be one you might want to talk about now, only because it's a Warren County school. And I don't know if that changes people's feelings on that. The others are either Essex or Clinton County. But that would be 5 teams that we would play, which could be as much as a 10-game season if we tried to do home and away. That's a fairly short season, certainly shorter than it would be. And then hockey, there are 4 other teams that we play. So if you did a home and away, that would be 8 games potentially. So it would be easy to keep the season short, but and I certainly respect Dr. Catania's opinion there. If we only played to the 26th, if we started practices on the 1st, could be a little bit tight. Some schools are advocating only playing a game every 3 days, so that if there was an infection, you wouldn't be affecting a lot of more schools. You'd find out more about it quickly. Clinton County's guidelines are tougher right now than Essex County's as far as quarantining. So that's why some of those schools are also making that decision. So just food for thought. Thank you, everyone.
Do you feel like those other districts are taking the precautions seriously, or what's the? Oh, I'm not muted. Do you feel like those other districts are taking the precautions seriously? I mean, what's the general attitude? I guess I should say the policy is one thing, but adhering to the policy, even when it's inconvenient,
I think some will. There are some schools that have been very conservative through this whole process. I think others, like all of it, I think, they say one thing and then 2 days later they're doing something different. So, I'll be honest with you, I'm a little shocked. If you'd have told me 3 weeks ago that there were going to be as many schools playing as are, I'd have told you you're crazy. So just based on what the athletic directors were sharing with me. So I think some will. I think some will, will be very, I think the guidelines show that at least for the number of personnel allowed in the gym show that they're serious about that. And because we were very meticulous in our last athletic directors meeting, putting that together. So, I think, I do. I think some schools will be very conservative in playing games.
Will you have any trouble finding officials, do you think, John?
Only because there are so many teams in the southern part of this section that are not playing. Certainly there are officials that won't officiate, but I think because, at least in basketball, I don't think it'll be an issue. For the hockey piece, I really can't speak to that because right now it looks, at least the schools we play, all of them are playing hockey. So, but I think there's less. Nobody's playing as many games, so I don't think officials are going to be a real issue. I haven't heard that that's going to be. We talked about it in the beginning, but I haven't heard anything recent. That's why I think we're probably okay. I haven't talked to my hockey coaches about hockey officials yet, though, but I haven't heard that that's an issue.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody else? Anyone have anything?
I just want to make a quick comment. I know I've been making like a lot of comments lately, but just want to thank the students that sent in emails. I thought that they were very well worded. They were very respectful, but they made their point clear. And I wanted to thank them for their involvement and wanting to speak up for themselves. That was good to see.
Okay, let's move on to the capital project update. There's one attachment, which is the incident report regarding the roof. Otherwise, Dana, Roger, you have anything to add?
No, I think that was fortunately for that incident where it occurred in a back stairwell, and didn't really impact any classrooms or anything like that. I think just a few damaged ceiling tiles in a back stairwell. So it looks like that they were able to address and figure out where it occurred and address it, and hopefully that will fix it. But we'll see if any others pop up before the end of the winter.
But they're not, we're not.
I have nothing specific to add. That's what I had to go through the rigmarole and say. You know, it's been winding down now for a while, so there's very little work going on, but we do have, you know, final projects and final work going on. I mentioned in your background notes about the auditorium sound system, that our people are now learning how to use the new sound system, which is great. And we will be, you know, starting to use the auditorium in a limited way very soon. And Dana, do you know if so some of the other unfinished business, do you know if the covers on the lights got put on? No, I haven't heard either. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, sorry, I didn't have your speaker on.
Yeah, I don't believe so. I have not seen Dow Electric here. It doesn't look like they've been around.
So it's sort of the unfortunate final, you know, comments as most construction projects. I know it was true when my house was under construction. The last things take forever to get done, and that's kind of where we are. But you know, we are finishing things up. We'll be having a final meeting soon with our architects and our construction managers. So we are getting ready to close out business. We still have a few things in the spring that, you know, require better weather to finish up with the landscaping, but, you know, we are almost there.
Thank you. Appears to be no change orders, correct? Moving on, the minutes for the board meeting, that was under your consent. Personnel, administrative retirement. The recommended action is a motion to accept the retirement of Roger Catania as superintendent of schools effective June 30th, 2021. May I have a motion to accept this, please?
Yes.
Thank you, Liam.
Second.
Second. Martha? Any discussion?
Do we have to accept it?
That's what I want to know.
That's the vote coming up. But
Thank you, Dan.
I just would like to say, I'll have more to say later, but you mentioned in your retirement letter that you're leaving the district on solid ground. And I want it very clear that that solid ground is there because you built the foundation. When I chose to run for school board, I was asked if I was serious, followed by, are you crazy? The school's a mess. Well, by the time I began my tenure here, I sat on the board and I said, where's the mess? Doesn't seem to be a mess here. That's due to the fact that in the short time that you were here, you managed to stabilize the district fairly rapidly. I sat down and I said, what makes a successful leader? And I just threw a few things down: sensibility, humbleness, friendly, quiet, confident, ambitious, team-oriented, strategic thinker, and transparency. Roger, all these attributes are you. Thank you for your years of service, and thank you for the solid ground you're leaving us with. So. Any other comments? If not, the moment has arrived.
I gotta say that there's been 3 votes since I've been here that really have stuck out. One was the vote on the resource officer. 2 was the vote on the wall. And 3 in this vote.
Yeah.
So I guess between the police and a rock wall, we're in a good place with Roger.
Are you gonna vote yes, no?
Is there a maybe?
There is an abstain.
You can abstain.
If we all abstain.
Yes, reluctantly, yes. That's what he
Yes.
wants.
We have to
He's
respect
gotta
his
wear, he's
wishes.
got a real casual attire from here on out. That's the.
Yeah.
Yeah, time's gone, bud. Maybe a little ponytail starting.
Did everybody vote?
Yeah, I'm just trying to, oh, Joan is back.
Yes.
Yes, so it's 6 yes.
6 yes, reluctantly, and so the motion passes. Teaching assistant retirement. Upon recommendation of the superintendent, accept retirement of Patty McConvey, teaching assistant at the middle high school, effective July 12th, 2021. May I have a motion, please?
Yeah.
Thank you, Dan. Seconded by Daniel. Got a bang bang here, huh?
So if you think the last retirement was tough, everybody,
Yeah.
this
Yes.
one is the one. And I'm
Patty
here to tell you
McConvey.
that Patty McConvey is the heart and soul of this school district, of this school, the middle and high school, where she's been now for a long time. And, you talk about school climate, school culture. Well, it takes people to make school climate and school culture work. And she's a leader in that respect. And I had an experience earlier this year where somebody said, pick somebody who doesn't have the title of a leader and tell us who it is. And that was who came to my mind. It was Patty McConvey. Patty McConvey is a teaching assistant who's had such an impact, such a tremendous impact on people in this school district, and she will be tremendously missed. So.
Agree, thank you. No other comments, please vote.
Dan? 6 yes.
6 yes, 0 no, the motion passes. Teaching assistant maternity leave. Am I off mute?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Switching screens here, I get lost. Upon recommendation of the superintendent, approve the maternity leave extension request of Cameron Shipman, teaching assistant at the elementary school through May 21st, 2021. May I have a motion, please?
I'll make a
So
motion.
moved.
Anybody, Karen, let me know.
I don't see anybody.
Joan, thank you, Joan. And may I have a second? Martha. Thank you, Dan. Any comments? If not, we'll ask you to vote.
Liam,
Yes.
sorry. 6 yes.
Okay, 6 yes, 0 no, the motion passes. Teaching assistant appointment change upon recommendation of the superintendent. Change the appointment of Emily Dishner from full-time long-term teaching sub-assistant to full-time long-term 80% teaching assistant, 20% special education teacher at the elementary school. Certification is in the area of students with disabilities, grade 1 through 6, childhood education, and teaching assistant level 3. Ms. Dishner's pay will be at the per diem rate of $181.65 from February 8th, 2021 through June 25th, 2021. Benefits will remain the same. I take it that's a daily rate.
Yeah,
Okay, thank you. May I have a motion, please?
Yes.
Thank you, Dan. Second?
Yes.
Thank you, Liam. Any discussion? If not, I will ask you to vote.
Yes.
Thank you, I'm sorry.
No, I'm sorry, my technology gave out.
6 yes.
6 yes, 0 no, the motion passes. Substitute pay increase is consent. The additional action items, the Calendar approval is consent. And then there is special education. We'll be adding a C, which will be the,
So if you refresh, I've added, the C on there
okay,
and, I put in the two in the administrative part. Thoughts for wording,
thoughts for wording?
yes? Because I don't know which way you're gonna vote.
Okay,
So, and then I think, so one of the things I had to take out was the effective date.
correct.
And then I had to change, and I don't know if we're going past basketball and we want to specify basketball and hockey, want to specify varsity only. Does that make sense?
Correct.
Can I make one more recommendation?
Yes, you may.
That if we're gonna allow sports, that it should be for both sports. I think that's very important. We not want to play favorites here.
Correct. And they're both in this.
Well, what about volleyball and lacrosse?
Wait on those. Yes, please.
Okay,
So, I mean, we can, the first resolution, if this is a resolution as it may, we vote yes or no, and if it's no, then no, then, so essentially it negates number two, the way I look at it. So, yeah, the word is varsity in here.
it is not.
Okay, so
I
after
put that in.
after girls and boys varsity basketball and girls and boys varsity hockey. Is that?
You have a proposed start date, and I'll add that, and then I'll pop it into the action place.
What is, do you have the March 1st?
March 1st is Monday, March 1st.
That-
Also, so I think the two possible dates would be Monday, February 22nd, and Monday, March 1st.
Well, I respect your desire to wait a full week after this break for, not unlike we have waited a full week for Super Bowl, a full week for Christmas, and a full week for New Year's to see if there's a, elevation in cases or an increase in cases.
I guess I should have one other question. Would the sports follow the same in-person, remote? I mean, obviously they're not going to be remote, but if in-person instruction is down because of a positive case, does that carry over to sports as well, like all school activities? Okay.
I believe that's even in, we would do that regardless, I'm sure, but I believe that's actually in the county regulations, but I can't remember it, so.
Is everyone prepared that I read this
Which date?
off the first, March 1st? Yeah,
Okay.
Monday, March 1st. Sorry.
I'll just put it right in now.
And that's in those two slots, right?
Yep.
Let me know when I refresh again, please.
Okay.
I mean-
Now,
I mean, I can put those two in, but
well, I'm actually gonna put it in the, to make it the actual motions.
for me, Liam, this is right there with the wall.
What's that?
This vote is,
Yeah,
I've been back and forth for days.
Okay, so I pasted it into the recommendation here.
Monday, March 1st.
Did I say Monday?
It says Wednesday.
Oh, Wednesday, I'm sorry. Oh, is that-
Okay,
You
so,
can't read right now.
okay. Yeah, that reads well. Okay, recommended action, whereas Governor Cuomo has authorized that high-risk sports can begin on February 1st, 2021 in New York State, whereas Essex County Department of Health issued a statement allowing higher-risk scholastic sports can resume on February 1st, 2021. Following the interim guidance of sports and recreation during the COVID-19 public health emergency, whereas after discussion, the Board of Education wishes to allow high-risk varsity sports to begin at Lake Placid Central School effective March 1st, 2021, using the guidelines issued by the Essex County Department of Health. Therefore, be it resolved, the following high-risk sports are approved to begin on Monday, March 1st, 2021, girls and boys varsity basketball and girls and boys varsity hockey. Be it further resolved that the high-risk sports adhere to the Essex County Department of Health guidelines. May I have a motion, please?
Yes.
Thank you, Dan. And Daniel, second. Last chance for further discussion before a vote.
Yeah, I think I made these points before, but, big picture here. The courts are closed. The town hall is closed. The banks are closed. We still cannot leave the state. We still do not have, people with, I believe it was just Monday where people with, preconditions are just started to be vaccinated. By the time this starts, that's March 1st, you still will not have parents of students who have preconditions vaccinated. That means there is a risk that someone could be a parent or a guardian could become very seriously ill as a result of this vote. Additionally, our schools provide more than just education. We've got 40% of our students on food aid. So disruptions to this school also impact the health and well-being of our students. That being said, I'm gonna vote no.
Okay, so it's 5 yes and Ian is a no. Well, you have to.
Yeah.
Yeah, no.
So it's 5-4, 1 against, the motion passes.
Now, winter coaching, do we need to approve coaches? And is John still on?
I
Did
don't
he
see
have,
him.
I am here.
He's on.
Yep.
do you have coaches in mind?
Yes. Do you want them now?
Yes, please.
Do you want me to type in the chat room or just tell you the names?
What works for you? Karen?
Oh, are we creating another motion?
We have to.
We have to, because we're not gonna have another meeting before this starts.
John, if I could, boys varsity basketball, Brian Brandes. Girls varsity basketball, Jeff Potter. Boys varsity hockey, Keith Clark. Girls varsity hockey, Butch Martin. Am I right?
Yes, plus the assistants. There's a paid assistant for both. They would be included.
Oh, I don't know them. Now,
Oh, so I have it here.
It's
So,
a-
the
Ryan
assistant hockey coach is Ryan McHugh,
right.
and the girls hockey is Josh Dan. So those are the only 2 assistants. Wait, who was the varsity boys basketball? Brian Brandon.
Brian Brandis.
For this, yeah, for this season. And we do have a pattern, John, of having some kind of prorated when the season's short. So I think we should probably leave out the
Yep, the amount.
salaries
Yeah.
in this resolution until that's determined. Does that sound right?
Yes.
Okay, so this is going to be a 9D. Yeah, not yet though.
Yes.
Yeah, that was more
I mean
Brian.
that, I mean that. all due respect.
That was
That was more Brian than Lynn.
I don't get, yeah, I don't get to see you. Good to see you.
Almost there.
Take your time.
But
Are you doing cases on Zoom?
yes,
Oh,
Terrible.
what you're doing.
it's terrible.
Yeah, I got all night because the little one's already in bed. Amanda had to put her down, so I got nothing to go back for.
You're not gonna have to do it.
Yeah.
Why do you took this school board down?
Exactly. I was, whatever can get me out of that, like, you know, dinner to bedtime witching hour.
We are live. Somebody may be listening in.
Yeah. She knows.
I appreciate your comments.
Just a little bit like, I can't record. I have to make arguments with my like trash can and my microwave in the back.
You can refresh them.
Okay. All right. Join the meeting. Winter coaches. Okay.
Yeah, I'll take them out afterwards.
So the recommended action, BD, take two. Upon recommendation of the superintendent, approve the following coaches for the 2020-2021 winter sports season. Varsity hockey, boys SLP Keith Clark. Varsity hockey boys SLP assistant coach Ryan McHugh. Varsity hockey girls SLP head coach Butch Martin. Varsity hockey girls assistant coach Josh Dan. Varsity basketball boys Brian Brandis, and varsity basketball girls Jeff Potter. My apologies, I skipped over the basketball. May I have a motion to accept these coaches?
Yes.
Thank you, Dan. Second.
Second.
Yes.
Thank you, Daniel. Any discussion?
Yep, here you go again. So, my concern again is raised for our teacher coaches. So that would be Brandis, Potter,
No.
Clark. So again, it seems like we are now introducing another element where if they get COVID, then it's another disruption in that they're going, then their class, is Brandis math still?
Math and computer technology.
He used to do regions when I was there.
Yeah, it's changed. Yeah.
Or whatever, yeah.
Mostly computer technology.
Computer technology. So then it seems like that would be another way to disrupt our, in-person education. For that reason, we vote no.
Thank you, Liam. Anybody else have any comments?
Is Martha there? She isn't there. Martha, are you gonna vote? Yeah, so 5 yes, 1 no.
Okay. 5 yes, 1 no, motion passes. Go to the cause. Do we have?
No.
Okay. Okay. Discussion phase. Just what was going to be covered here is what does not fall under executive session. So, and that is selecting an option for pursuing the filling of Dr. Catania's position. There are 3 options, and the succession plan had those options listed for building principal, for superintendent, and the other positions. The superintendent, the option 1 is utilization of services for an outside consultant to lead the search. For external candidates, consider appropriate price range, include relocation benefits, so forth. Option 2 is conduct search in-house, similar to previous principal and superintendent searches. Consider external candidates with relocation and benefits. And then there's an option 3 to utilize the BOCES district superintendent search services. Consider external candidates with relocation benefits, and that reads the same. So it's hiring a consultant to do a search for us. It is to conduct the search in-house. And the third option is to utilize BOCES district superintendent search services. For transparency's sake, I had the opportunity to meet with Douglas Gerhardt, our attorney. It didn't cost us any money. It was a sort of a personal type of situation, and got some information from Douglas. He certainly would appreciate being part of the process later on, such as in the contract negotiations, and he actually does the negotiations with the individuals and the offering of a position. He was quite verbal about the utilization of the BOCES services, as he said, and I've spent hours putting together some more specific succession plannings on search teams, such as we did with principals and that type of thing. And it's a lot of work, from the graphic artistry to the placing of the ads, right on to screening the candidates and then selecting the candidates for the first round. So I did take the opportunity to discuss with Dale Brault, who is the district superintendent for BOCES, what could he offer? he has negotiated or done search for Tupper Lake as well as St. Regis Falls, successful searches. And as you can imagine, probably difficult searches. But he has sent me a packet of the services that they provide. This is a standard service for BOCES to be involved in. So with that said, I guess I'd like some discussion and some input on to what people are thinking. I know this is last minute. There is no reading material, and I apologize for that. But aside from that, the rest of the discussion will go into executive session to discuss some specifics that I need to discuss with everyone. So. Anybody have anything?
So on the basis of time is essential at the moment in getting this started, I like the idea of having the BOCES service. I mean, if they've done it before, they must have an outline and a process for going through it. Instead of reinventing the wheel and trying to do it ourselves, I think that would definitely be the way to go.
I agree with Dan. And I also think that we spend a lot of money on BOCES. So any other service we can get out of them.
I said, okay, Dale, stop. How much is this going to cost? And he said, it's no additional fees.
Perfect.
Is BOCES able to reach beyond?
Saw Dana's head go crazy there. That's good.
Martha wants to
Okay.
say something.
Is BOCES able to reach beyond our pool of very highly qualified white people? And maybe we can look into networks that we're not normally part of, just to enliven the discussion.
Well, I guess I'm concerned about the use of race in the discussion of this.
Yes.
And it's been brought up again.
My bad.
Appropriate. I think that it could impact our liability on this if we go with somebody that's not what we've stated. I'm happy to look to have him search or to have BOCES search, far and wide, but ultimately it's going to be the best candidate that gets this, regardless of the color of their skin, their gender, their persuasion, their sexual persuasion, whatever. So the comment was brought up on race before, and I think that that opens us up for some real problems. So I get it on the diversity side, but there's a lot of other things that is included in diversity.
Yep, agree.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Well, I would say, let me unmute myself. I think to not make the same specific comment, but I think one of the issues that I would say having with, using a regional source like that is, are we going to get the same candidates that are cycling through the system up here? How broad a net do they cast? Are we going to get the best candidate? Or are we going to get a candidate who is deemed as having put in their time to deserve, you know what I mean? Like the phrase good old boy club, are we going to get good old boy club candidates who are on the insiders, or are we going to get the best candidate? So that would be, I definitely think that having someone else besides us do it is the way to go, whether that's the third party group or the BOCES. And I'm fine with BOCES if we feel like they are going to have a pool of candidates, qualified candidates that are going to get us the results that we want. But I don't know that, so that would be a question more than a statement.
Will they advertise on the, like through the newspaper that we get, the NYSS?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've got a list here of where they suggest, but Dale was very candid in saying, we will do anything you want us to do. We're a resource. If you have some other avenues, some other areas that you want to cast the net, let us know. That is one thing we will pay for, and you expect to pay for it, is the advertising.
Yeah. And Martha, I'm all about having a cast the widest net possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We spent a lot of, both Douglas and Dale and myself spent, those were different conversations, by the way, spent a lot of time speaking about Lake Placid and what it has to offer, right, especially right now. Maybe we'll get somebody who wants to get out of the city, the urban area that they're dealing with right now. But there's some other issues that I'll bring up that I can't bring up in public, but that are concerned. So but our current, Dale did send me a timeline, which I was shocked at seeing. I just spoke to him. And obviously we want to get things started yesterday. But it has Roger staying on until, I believe it's October. There's negotiated contract. It has the position being finalizing a contract in the end of May, early June. So we may be doing a contract. We don't know. It depends. We do have, as was mentioned before, we do have internal candidates, which they wouldn't have to move here. They're here. So there's all sorts of elements to this. So. Any other comments before we go into a brief? I don't see the executive session lasting long at all. So. Yes, Joan.
I just want to be really quick, Rick. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I agree with Daniel on all his comments. The only thing I just really think of is, BOCES knows us as a school and our needs and how successful we've been. So I really think that they would work hard for us and they would understand the right candidates too. So.
To build on that, thank you for the introduction. I forgot, one of Dale's comments was he thanked me for thinking of them. And he said, I have skin in this game as well. I work closely with Roger. I work closely with the other superintendents of the district. And I'd certainly like to get the best candidate to work with. Not that we could ever replace Roger, but we'll look at going in that direction. So
second best.
Right. Yeah. 3 pairs of socks to fill those shoes. Yeah. Any other comments? If not, I'd like to entertain a motion to go into executive session.
So moved.
I'm sorry. The adjournment part of the meeting need to go through first. Your meeting dates and locations are listed there. Any old business? Any new agenda topics? If not, recommended action is to move into executive session for the purpose of discussing a particular individual. May I have a motion, please?
Yes.
Thank you, Liam.
Yes.
Second. Thank you, Daniel. Wow. Take that suit away from that guy.
Don't worry, next time I'll come to a flannel.
All in favor?
Aye.
So we have 6-4-0 against.
Good night, everyone.
Hi, Dana.
Night.
I'm gonna give it to Rick.
And then what if it does run out of time?
Yeah, that's my only.
9 o'clock?
Motivation.
Yeah, we'll be done
Yeah,
by
yeah,
9.
Okay.
Yep.
Make it happen.
Alright, hold on.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you. And then I'll give you
Hi,
the,
everybody.
I'll leave on your desk who the second.
Well, I won't leave you.
What's that?
I won't leave.
Oh, okay.
So
fact,
Roger's
you-
going to show up to work
You
tomorrow.
can, you can certainly
like
stay if
hoodie,
you'd like, since you're
unshaven.
part of this.
He just shaved for the last time.
Yeah.
Huh?
Black Sabbath t-shirt.
I can stay.
Okay.
Rolling in it like, Karen, we're still live. Thank you, Roger.
Thanks, Roger.
We're not?
Still says it.
Says it up there, but
It does?
Yep.